Yes, Jake Pauls. This is for the third presenter on crowd pressure and effects. Unless I missed it, you didn't talk about how long the pressures were sustained at each level. And I'll note here that in Hillsborough, the pressures were sustained for something in the order of 30 minutes or more. And so once you've answered that question, was it seconds or minutes, or how long did you sustain those pressures? Were there some subjects who wanted to get out during the course of that pressure increase?
Well, I didn't hear, sorry.
How long is the pressure?
10 minutes, because the pressure was given by person, not mechanically pressed.
But how long did that exist? How long were they at the top pressure? 10 minutes
10
at
seconds.
the top
No,
pressure?
10 seconds.
10 seconds.
10 seconds, as long as 10 seconds.
Okay. And did anyone ask to leave the experiment before you reached that maximum pressure?
Maximum pressure, pardon?
Did anyone want to leave during the experiment? Did any of the volunteers want to stop?
No.
And they were given that opportunity to stop the experiment, were they?
Everyone was in good condition after the experiment. They enjoyed. Why not try again? You said.
But you are aware
All
how...
the subjects were my students.
Yes.
Very good
Okay.
students.
I'm just trying to relate back to what we discussed this morning on ethics.
Subjects are subjects.
Yes. Okay, because in real events, of course, the time periods are much longer.
Another question? Steve?
The same speaker. You went up to 14 people per metre squared. Did you decide beforehand that was the maximum value? Sorry. Did you decide the maximum population density of 14 persons per metre squared beforehand, based on, for instance, some of the Russian data that's available of maximum levels? Or did you push them up to that level and then stop?
Well, we researched the preceding research with the maximum of 16.
16.
But it was by enlarged, the power was enlarged by the mechanical system, which was done more than 50 years ago. Now it's impossible to make a mechanical pressure on the human body due to the research techniques. And also, to reduce the 2 square meters is the utmost by human power. So, which means that the subjects were still not so with the maximum level.
This, the woman in the red?
I have a question about the love parade. I've heard that a lot of dead people were dying in the stairwell. So I wonder what you know about the accident and why didn't you take this into account?
Media reports initially said that a lot of people were dying on the stairwells. There were reports of people who had actually fallen off the stairwells, but in later reports it showed that people died around the from the western tunnel leading up the ramp, around that region. So not right up against the wall, it's just some distance from that wall. But they said that no one actually died from the people falling from the stairwell or being crushed against the stairwell. The investigation is still ongoing, so I'm sure there'll be more information about the exact location of where those people died.
Thank you.
Question for the speaker who gave the talk about the crushing people.
Thanks. Just a quick question. Do you take the dimensions of the people before the test?
With the slide, the average dimension was even shown in slide and papers, of course.
So you have the dimensions of each individual person. Okay.
What
The shoulder.
40 centimeters, 20 centimeters, that's the average Japanese size.
Did you work out in the range of people per meter squared at what point there was no more space and at what point the bodies start to deform? It would be a useful line on the graph if you knew when they run out of space and when the bodies started squeezing. Do you know at what density there was no space left and it was just pressure?
Space up?
If you did a calculation with the area of each person, you would find out in the range of tests that you did, when there was no more space, when the only thing happening, the only further compression was actual bodies rather than space.
From the views, of real cave, it seems that almost no room for a body. There's no space, almost no space. But the body shrinks, still shrinks.
Yeah.
If I press now.
What
But it's very
density,
dangerous.
at what density, what's the minimum density at which there is no more free space?
Well, I've expressed only as high as 14, but I don't know how.
You could work it out from if you have the dimensions of the people. You could calculate it afterwards. It would be a useful thing to do to find out in all those tests at what point they ran out of space.
Maybe squash it. Squash it.
That would be useful.
As I said,
Probably don't have it now, but it would be
as I
useful
said,
to
the
do.
preceding experiments, we did that it was 16 or more, but I couldn't.
Okay. Thanks.
Down in front.
I can just yell. Questions for Elise. Looking at your a couple slides back over numbers, if I understand it correctly, along the bottom was the sum of all evacuation time. And it looked like the maximum was about 940,000 and the minimum was about 860,000. It's less than a 10% difference. Did that surprise you? Did you expect more between the different strategies?
It wasn't particularly surprising. I would say if we had, you sort of have control of that when you have a little small example. So we could have changed parameters and made it more extreme. We didn't do that. So it's just a matter of the settings that we chose for that. We tried to pick our numbers based on the literature so that they would make sense.
If you had a bigger range, you'd probably get a bigger network.
Yeah, there'd be more options for people to move, more things that you can do. We set limits on how much capacity could change, and we fixed the total capacity changes so that you couldn't just expand the whole system because of space limitations. So within the range on the small network, that's what it came out to be. Yeah, but I would say that you still see that the very more dramatic differences in the reconfiguration than in the rerouting, which I thought was very significant findings.
And then
Yeah, a question for Tomoaki, hope I pronounced your name correctly. You sent your survey out to 700 people and you got 230 replies. What was the total number of people that were evacuated?
The population of the survey town is about 8,000 people. But all of the area is about 80,000 people evacuated out of 20 kilometer area.
A lot of people.
A question for Elise. I assume in your model, everyone knew where all the exit points were, and it was so they had perfect knowledge and they had perfect line of sight, and they could make the perfect decisions.
We used a stochastic user equilibrium instead of a user equilibrium to say that there was some imperfection. So in our model, we actually put in two terms in the utility function that add error. So our errors were not necessarily focused though on the destination. Our destinations were known.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
so they knew the destination.
They knew, yeah, which way to get to a destination, but they didn't necessarily have perfect information about the various routes to the destination. They had subjective information. So yeah, I'm not sure that I would know offhand how to model and be able to solve this mathematically with destinations that were that were not known. That would be a more complicated problem mathematically. We're not using simulations, so
Yeah,
you don't have as much control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other questions? No one? Everyone's happy? Thank our speakers.